Welcome into the Autzen Audibles podcast. Matt Prehm, Erik, Skopil on the show from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. We are here for the Orange Bowl. A couple days away. We're recording it after Media Day on the 30th. So about, a little under 48 hours to kick off, probably 40-ish.
That sounds accurate.
Yeah, we've hit the point where it's the typical period of the after Christmas and before New Year's. There's football on it every day at all times, plus the media commitments. We don't know what day it is. We don't know what time it is. It's 3 hours ahead of normal, but we're recording it for West Coast people where it's 3:30. It's just a different time. And what we do know is the Ducks are preparing for the Orange Bowl against a very worthy, very good opponent in Texas Tech. And we wrapped up Media Day. We're going to kind of discuss a little bit about what we saw at practice, what we saw, heard from Media Day perspective, and also kind of preview Thursday's 9 a.m. Pacific time, 12 p.m. local time kickoff. First, Erik, let's go to the injury report, which came out yesterday, and then we were able to watch practice a little bit.
Yeah, Evan Stewart, nowhere to be seen at practice in Miami.
He is in Miami.
I have quotes. I can confirm this. We were actually skeptical of necessarily, is he even here? Because he was ruled out, was not at practice. And then about an hour and a half maybe after open practice, we were over at the Orange Bowl facility and kind of like a conference area. And there was Media Day, and one of the first people I saw was Evan Stewart, who told me this, and I'll just read the quote here. I've done the reporting, it's over on the site, but had kind of an extensive conversation with it. I think it was like the first time he'd spoken to media since spring.
Yeah,
probably.
Mm-hmm.
He says, honestly, I'm just testing. I'm trying to get back and compete with the guys. I'm just blessed to be here with them. Sometimes stuff hits the fan and sometimes stuff goes smooth. I'm going to keep chopping every day. So kind of not necessarily a ton to glean from it. I did ask him a couple other questions regarding the injury and kind of like what's going on, but I think that he wants to play. And like, I think that's been maybe a question for fans of like, what's actually going on? Is he actually attempting to go back? And of course, Dan didn't. Let me go find that quote as well here. What we go here. Dan didn't really simplify things when he was asked earlier and said, "No setback. We just like moving up and down, so you guys can talk about it and not talk about our team." I
think that was him talking some smack to the media. And
you think so? I think that's how I took it too, Matt. Yeah. So I mean, ultimately, don't know Evan Stewart in this game. Frankly, and we said it before, like I don't know if that really matters a bunch at this point. I mean, that's not a diss on.
He's not going to help Oregon very much beyond being a decoy.
Yeah, with how guys have played football in over a year. Remember, he didn't even play in last year's Rose Bowl because of a back injury. So, this isn't a guy who's been available for a really long time. So I don't know if this is a big story, but it is a big story in terms of the context of like people want to know what's going on with this guy. We actually saw him in the flesh, talked to him, did an interview, story over in DuckTerritory to go check it out if you have more questions about it, because I think a lot of that's answered, including like where's his headspace for 2026? Will it be at Oregon? Will it be at another school? Will it be the NFL? Kind of all options remain open, but clearly a talented player who's not going to be a part of this game.
I think we said at the beginning of the playoffs when the brackets were released on December 7th or 8th, whatever day it was, we had John Evans on the show too, and we all kind of agreed that we felt like the likelihood of Gary Bryant Jr. and Corian Moore seeing the field was high, and we didn't really think that Evan Stewart's probability of playing at any point in the college football playoffs was all that real. And I think this kind of really cements the fact that the quotes that he gave you of up and down. Some days it feels great. Some days it doesn't feel great. That tells me that's a player that's not close to playing.
Yeah. And actually, on that same thought, I've got a quote here, so I can find it really quickly, of just kind of like why he even tested it out. And like last week, remember, he was questionable, not last week, but for the JMU game, remember, he was questionable, then doubtful, and did go through some of the warm-ups. And sorry, I'm still trying to pull this up. Here he goes. It's a couple of things that are still not clicking yet, if that makes sense. A lot of things are clicking enough to try some things. Me going out there and warming up, maybe I feel good, maybe I can go. It just so happened the other week that I couldn't. So, I think that's probably enough Evan Stewart talk. There's a big game going on here. The other good news, like Jordan Davison, a player who didn't finish the game, we saw him in a walking boot. Full go, not on the availability report. Theron Johnson, a starting cornerback, had, I think, a head injury probably. Yep. Full go, not on the availability report. So Oregon is relatively healthy. The names that are out for this game, I mean, again, I'm not trying to be too dismissive, but these are guys that, frankly, probably weren't going to be massive contributors, or we already knew they weren't going to be contributors for this game. Yeah, sorry, I'm efforting to pull it up here. Here's the list. Kingston Lopa, transferred, so he's not playing. Kyler Casper, we've known he's been out forever. Samuel Alea been out forever, also in the portal. Justice Lowe in the portal. Solomon Davis in the portal, and then DeJohn Riggs, Janoris Wilson, not in the portal. I did see Janoris Wilson.
He was here.
He was here, unfortunately, on a scooter with his left or right foot in a cast.
I think it's safe to say his season's probably over.
His season is over, and I'd heard a while ago that maybe he was a broken foot, was what I was told. So I don't think that's a player you expect to see, which is a bummer. It's a contributor who's been helpful, but overall, this is a team that's going to put out 22 players that are all caliber players that should start games.
Yeah, Noah Whittington today said that he felt like for himself and for the team, they're maybe as fresh and healthy as they've been all season long. And I think a big hot topic from an Oregon perspective this playoff run has been the difference between the bye last year and the 28 or 29 day layoff that they had before playing January 1st against Ohio State, and comparing it to this one where they had about a 10-day break before they played JMU. They played the Dukes, and then they get about a 12, 13-day break after that before playing Texas Tech. And I think the relative narrative from Oregon's side is that they much prefer this version of the scheduling. I don't think necessarily not having a bye. Dan Lanning actually said he supports the byes. He likes the idea of having byes. The top teams should get that kind of advantage. What he doesn't like is the fluctuating dates and schedule timeline in between those games. And from an Oregon perspective, at least, this team is saying they're as healthy as they've been. They're in rhythm because of how they've structured this playoff run. And theoretically, then on paper, I think it's fair to say you should expect your A game on paper against Texas Tech. Now, the Red Raiders will certainly impact your ability to do that, but Oregon shouldn't be. They don't have really a box to stand on to say this time around things were difficult for them to get ready for this game or to knock the rust off or whatever you want to describe it as. This is all full go. Everyone should be in rhythm.
And another thing, kind of in the context, and we're just talking about the difference in schedules last year. I got a lot of people who were talking about what last year's game meant for them and the motivation. I think it was Amari who maybe used some bad words to describe it, which is not unusual. But just basically was that sucked. The night has not been lost. I think Mateo, when I asked him about it, I was like, the coach is bringing this up regularly, and his answer was they don't need to. They mentioned it a couple of times, and it's anybody who was a part of that, it's been lingering. Even Dylan Thieneman, I think people forget.
He wasn't on the team.
He wasn't on the team, but he made the trip to Pasadena, was with the team, and he said just being around the guys in the aftermath of that, that was meaningful for him to get a sense of what this was going to be like. So, or kind of what that loss meant, et cetera. So I think you look at this and go, motivation is not a factor. This team is going to be dialed in, focused. They want to prove what happened last year was not who this team is. And I know it's literally a full calendar year ago, but even with that being the case, you don't just move on necessarily from that entirely. And I think this team was embarrassed, obviously, a year ago, and now is an opportunity to move on from that and to prove your step further. And honestly, you can, Mateo said it, they thought they were going to the national championship last year. This group still has that very much on the mind here. That's the focus, even though they're taking it one game at a time.
I think this is a game where if we think Oregon is as loaded from an on-paper blue chip ratio, NFL draft ratio perspective as we think they are. Remember, ESPN's Matt Miller released at the start of the playoffs kind of here's all the guys that would get drafted for each team, from all the way from Indiana all the way down to JMU. And Oregon tied for the most. They had 17 guys on that roster that were draft eligible. This isn't even taking into consideration sophomores or freshmen that could find their way into the NFL draft in a couple of years, but just draft eligible players. This was 17 Ducks before, and this came after Bear Alexander announced he was returning. So Oregon theoretically would have 18. He acknowledged that he would be a second or third round draft pick if he was sticking with the draft. Poncho is obviously on that list. He has since said he's returning
Right.
back to school. But I think this is – Tech had guys. I think there were close to 10 guys on their roster that were draftable players that were eligible. But I think you and I kind of brought this up at Media Day, and we don't want to make too much about it, but like just from an appearance perspective, Oregon physically looked different than A&M. And Joey McGuire's talked, the Texas Tech's head coach, talked a lot about how these two programs are very similar in alignment of how they're constructed and where their history is at and kind of where they're projecting and where they're going and whatnot. And I agree with them. There's a lot of things that are similar there. This also feels very much like a game, like the national championship game between Ohio State and Oregon in 2015, where Oregon had some NFL players. They had a generational talent in Marcus Mariota who won the Heisman.
Yeah.
But there was a clear distinction between Oregon and Ohio State from a roster perspective and the depth perspective and the talent and athletics perspective. And this feels like, for me, this feels like a kind of prove it moment for Oregon. Like we've seen this team and we've seen its recruiting success. We've seen its portal success. We've seen its development success. If we all buy into that, which I strongly do, this is a game that could potentially where I don't necessarily think they're going to dominate or blow out Texas Tech, but they should win this game because, simply put, they have more better players than Texas Tech does.
I think the thing that was interesting talking to, and obviously this wasn't an exhaustive conversation with limited time, but talking to a handful of Tech players, just Oregon's speed.
Yeah.
And that was a big concern for them. Obviously, they're not coming out and saying that they're not able to match up with it, but it's clear that that's on their mind. Like Oregon's, especially on the outside, on both sides of the ball, just has a lot of twitchy, big-time athletes. And again, not taking any shots at Tech and saying they don't, but to me, that could be where this game is won. And the counter to that is, if you're Tech, can you get in the way to make sure that's not the case? And what I mean by that is, at the line of scrimmage, can you dominate to eliminate that advantage or minimize that advantage Oregon has on the outside? Like, I think on offense, it's pretty obvious. And we've talked about this. This is probably my biggest kind of matchup of the game, I guess, would be just, can Oregon's offensive line, which has been excellent all year at protecting Dante Moore, the top rated according to PFF pass protection unit in the country, against Texas Tech, which is the best pass rush unit according to PFF. Like, can Oregon give Dante Moore enough time to throw the ball downfield, to take advantage of Malik Benson on go routes, to take advantage of what Kenyon Sadiq can do kind of in the middle of the field with his dynamicism, with what DeCorian Moore, and I'm fascinated to see what his involvement will be, because last week we were excited to see him return.
Very minimal.
Didn't do a whole lot, right? Gary Bryant, same way. These are important players that have the speed to stretch the field. Like, what do you see from those guys? Feels impactful, but you don't have the opportunity to take advantage of that speed if Dante is under duress the whole game. And we've seen against Indiana.
Yes.
That was a problem. That was a couple months ago. We think things have regrouped. There's been some shifting and things have been improved, but this is going to be undoubtedly the biggest test since Indiana in terms of just maintaining everything at the line of scrimmage and allowing you to win down the field. Because in that game, we also felt like Oregon had the speed advantage. We saw it on the Malik Benson touchdown. That was basically the only time all game they had the time and the ability to make the plays.
Quite frankly, Indiana dominated the front, the line of scrimmage.
Exactly.
And
it's a prove-it game on that level too.
And very much to the point of, like, Oregon has a more talented on paper roster than Indiana. And that's why games aren't played on paper. They're played on the football field. And very clear, Indiana saw something where it was able to execute something and then manipulate Oregon's offense into their will of what they wanted to do. And I think it's very clear that this Tech staff, they are very talented, but they also get the most out of their players. And Joey McGuire, multiple times, whether it's been in Lubbock and we've watched his press conferences from remotely or now here at the Orange Bowl, I think they have found something in that Indiana game, because he has referenced it multiple times, or he has referenced Oregon, or he's referenced, Indiana and pairing them with Texas Tech. He did it today of, Oregon, or he said Texas Tech and Indiana are tied for the most, turnovers created in the country. And I think that's not by design. I think they've found something, or they think they've found something, or they're trying to replicating what the Hoosiers did, because they were above and beyond the most successful team of kind of strangling Oregon's offense to a degree. And that's going to be the question. Can Indiana replicate something similar, or can Texas Tech replicate something similar to what Indiana did and be effective? And then on the other side, has Oregon learned from those lessons and have found the solutions to what Indiana did to create havoc up front? Because that's the one game I feel like Dante Moore did not look Dante Moore-ish this whole season.
And I think referencing that game and kind of going back to it, what Indiana was able to do was throw a lot of exotics, a lot of simulated pressures, find ways to get creative to kind of change the quarterback's eyes, to confuse him, frankly, with the protections. We talked about that a lot at the time. I guess you were on break at that point, but John and I and other people when we were on the show, just like, this is not just a line up and beat you at the line of scrimmage effort by Indiana. It was confusing the protections, getting Dante on the line kind of out of sorts where they didn't know where it was coming. Traditionally, at least this season, and I guess this is the question I'll have going in, is will Tech kind of rotate what it does to play that style? Because that's not what they've needed to do in Big 12 play, frankly. They've been able to just line up sometimes with 3 or 4 guys and just win against 5, 6 players at the line of scrimmage. And that allows them to drop all that players back in coverage and cover players, and that covers up the biggest weakness of this Tech defense, which is its secondary. My question is, can they win with only 3 or 4 guys going after the quarterback, or do they need to bring more? And if they bring more, does that open up some of that stuff down the field, or some of that stuff, that quick hitting stuff that has been so successful against other teams? So that to me is like a huge component of this. And also, I think I saw the stat earlier that I believe Dan Lanning's undefeated in games where the opposition scored fewer than 30 points. Part of me wonders, like, if this game isn't a shootout, that probably favors Oregon. And I just wonder, I don't know, I guess I'm just fascinated by kind of what this game ends up playing out. Like, does it end up feeling like it's a shootout game, or does it end up being kind of a knockout, drag-out type of game, both of which Tech has proven capable of winning? But can Oregon kind of exert its will a little bit if they're able to change the way Tech attacks them defensively?
One thing I thought was interesting was, along those same lines, is Ben Roberts, their other star linebacker that they have on this roster. He was a redshirt freshman, and that was his first start in the 2023 game against Oregon. And he was terrific. I think he got like 12 and a half tackles, like 2 tackles for loss. I think he had a sack in that game. He was really productive. And I was talking to him today about just kind of like the differences between the two teams from then and now, and just kind of the growth and his growth and whatever. And he basically ended the conversation by saying, like, we'll see what happens. I'm really confident in my team because we have a defensive line this time around, whereas last year we weren't as good. And I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but he's referencing the impact that they've had on the portal. David Bailey, coming from Stanford, has turned into, or was already viewed as, kind of one of like a NFL guy.
Top 50 recruit at high school. Almost a 5-star.
But I think he's elevated himself from becoming an NFL draft pick to now probably a day 1 or a day 2 pick, which he wasn't before at Texas Tech. Romello Height, another outside linebacker edge guy, transferred from USC, has flourished there. And then they've got a couple other guys, and AJ Holmes, Lee Hunter, John Curry is another linebacker that does some work for them. Their defensive line here is significantly better. Their front 7 is significantly better. And that's going to be, to your point, can they get away with 3 or 4 guys because of the David Baileys and the Romello Heights and the Jacob Rodriguez and the Ben Hunters, or do they need to blitz more? Do they need to bring in more guys to the front? And you're right. Like that is ultimately going to be a big question. And this is probably the best offensive line by far that Texas Tech has played against this season.
Utah, with its tackles at least, is comparable. They've got NFL guys there. BYU's got some quality pieces, but you're right. In terms of the totality, just a Joe Moore Award finalist offensive line, nobody on their schedule is there.
Yeah. That's going to be a fascinating watch to see play out. But then on the flip side, Oregon's defense matching up against Tech's offense, to your point, they probably want this to be a shootout. I don't know if – or maybe the question becomes, can it become a shootout? Because I don't know how they're going to match up offensively, Tech's offense to Oregon's defense. To me, that's the wild card. Is this Tech offense really as good as the statistics say they are?
Yeah.
Or is it a byproduct of playing in a Big 12 conference that historically has not been one known to play great defense? Obviously, Utah is a phenomenal defensive program.
BYU has been a great defensive program.
And those are two programs that historically haven't been in the Big 12 for a while.
Yeah.
They obviously they are now, and they played them in that both teams. They played BYU twice. They kind of dominated BYU's offense the second time. I can't remember how successful they were offensively the first time around. And in the Utah game, they very similar. But I don't know if either of those offenses this season are as explosive or have they for sure don't have the quarterback play.
The upside of Oregon's offense feels better than both of those teams.
The ceiling is higher, and the floor is certainly higher for Oregon's offense compared to those other two. So that's, to me, that's like a huge wild card. Is like, I think individually this Tech offense has pieces, but are they going to be facing off against an Oregon defense that's as good as Tech's own defense, or how does that shake out?
Yeah, well, and of course the big question coming in here, and if you're a Tech fan, you're listening to this, you're probably screaming at your monitor if you're still listening. Just like this Oregon defense gave up 34 to James Madison, you really think this defense is going to be able to slow down a Tech offense? Which again, like your point, Matt, is correct. Like I think it almost gets overlooked because we talk so much about this Tech defense. This is the number 2 scoring offense in the country. I think they're fifth in total yardage. Like this is an offense for Tech that is extremely impressive and has dominated. Like this is why they've won every game this season by like 3 scores. I mean, this is a team that's been extremely impressive on both sides of the football. The defense gets all the accolades. I think it should, because to me, just like the eye test, it's the one that pops. But there's a lot of guys on offense for this Tech team that could absolutely cause some issues. And to me, it kind of starts with this passing game, which I've been fascinated by since we kind of started.
Big physical receivers
on the outside, a big slot receiver in Coy Aiken, who when Garrett Johnson came on from the Texas Tech 24/7 site, kind of highlighted that's just the way he's able to win in space, kind of a different body type. And then their tight end,
Terrence Carter Jr.,
who is big, but not that big, and he gets up and down the field.
He's very similar to Kenyon Sadiq, I think, in terms of body type.
That type. Yes. So it's a wide receiving core that complements each other, a tight end that complements each other, and then the running backs, especially Jacoby Williams. And I apologize for the ambient noise here. We're kind of in an area where there's a lot of people walking in and out, so hopefully that's not too distracting. But the running back, especially Williams, is a fantastic pass catcher who's been utilized a lot. So when you're playing defense against this Tech offense, like basically everybody besides the quarterback in your 5 offensive, like 5 players are viable pass options. This is an Oregon defense that has been outstanding. I think this is the best secondary Oregon has maybe ever had, or at least during the Lanning era.
During the Lanning era, I would definitely agree with that. I don't know.
The D-Boys back in...
D-Boys, also the Fiesta Bowl team had 2 NFL draft pick cornerbacks, Steve Smith, Rashad Bowman. They had Keith Lewis at safety, who's also an NFL player. But regardless, this secondary is in that conversation.
Yes, and because of that, it's like, can they get it done?
Yeah.
Because I guess I'm also a little bit wary of line of scrimmage play and Tech's ability to run the ball. I'm not really sure what to make of either of those operations. Like Oregon's rush defense has been awesome at times. They've also had some games where
it's kind of it.
They're kind of like, okay, like you're really going to just like Washington gashed them a lot, right? And James Madison, these are the 2 most recent opponents, kind of had their way at times against this Oregon defense.
And there's the lack of a pass rush.
And you look at Tech, and I go, this run game has 2 running backs. They're both very talented. I'm just curious to see if they could still get the push like they were getting in the Big 12. And again, I don't know. BYU probably at the line of scrimmage is on par, if not better, than Oregon. I mean, I think Oregon probably has higher ceiling athletes on the edge positions and in the middle. Like, I think Tech fans are going to be impressed by Amari Washington's quickness and agility and the way that Bear Alexander's been able to get upfield and make plays too. But you could make a case if you wanted that BYU's front has bigger bodies that are a little more physical. Can Oregon win there, or is this a situation where Tech is like, you have to make Tech one-dimensional? And to me, if you can make it a Baron Morton, who is not a dual-threat quarterback, mind you, kind of have to beat you.
Also revealed he's playing off of a hairline fracture.
Yep.
Which I don't know if Joey McGuire probably didn't want.
Well, we knew about the injury. It's just he said he was like 80% a couple of days ago.
Yes, probably didn't want that out there.
Well, it is.
It is. It's now out there.
And it's going to be. It's just going to. I don't know. I guess on that side of the ball, I'm just fascinated by this secondary against that receiving core, and like Oregon has massive corners, and these are big time athlete receivers on the outside. Like those matchups, like those one-on-ones, like we've seen Oregon against like a Rutgers, who has, I think at the time had the 2 best contested catch receivers, at least based on PFF stats, entire country. Oregon to shut those guys down. Is that something they're able to do? We've also seen against USC, like plenty of throws downfield.
I was just going to say too, how physical the officials will allow Oregon's secondary to play is also, quite honestly, a wild card, because if it's a tightly called game and they're going to throw flags for hand fighting and for any kind of physical contact, that's a disadvantage for Oregon.
Absolutely.
That is how Oregon likes to play defense. They like to just maul on defense. And will the officials allow that, or will this be a closely called game that any kind of knick-knack touch is going to result in a flag? That really, the reality is that's a wild card.
And if you're a Tech fan, you're going to watch this game and be annoyed by how physical Oregon's corners are with your receivers, because that's just how Oregon plays defense. And again, you're right. Like if it's a game where they're allowing that kind of play on the outside, you're going to be probably frustrated because you're going to say that's a PI a lot of times and the call's not going to come. But if it is a game where the yellow's coming out a lot, Oregon fans are going to be frustrated because
we've been doing that all year and now you're calling it.
Yeah, and it's been inconsistent. Like the USC game, it was a problem. There's been a ton of games. Like Oregon was the least penalized team in the country, I think, through 5 weeks. So that's definitely, I agree. That's a component too. It's like how the officiating, I hate to say it, but in the game where the margins feel so small, will absolutely be a component of this one that we'll be talking about afterwards. I have no questions.
Tech's offense has 4 different players who have at least 46 catches and at minimum 550 yards.
Yeah.
They are a extremely balanced team from a receiving perspective. They don't have one particular guy that's above and beyond like the dude, but they have 4 of them that are all capable of being the dude on any given game. And that's probably what makes their passing offense so scary, is that it could come from any one of them. And you just don't know where it's going to come from. And that from an Oregon defensive perspective, that's where you got to be locked in, ready to go on any given snap, because it could be anybody that could go over the top or across the middle to make those big plays. Do we want to transition now over to – do you have anything left?
I guess just, I mean, you mentioned it briefly, but we're talking about – and I think we talked about it a little bit already, but just the pass rush of Oregon, of like how impactful are they? Because this has been a group that a year ago was one of the best in the Big Ten and one of the top in the country through the regular season, at least, of getting after the quarterback. That's not the case this year. I think they're near the top of the country in pass breakups. Let me see if I can pull that up really quickly. Oh, those are individual players.
Well, they had Tatum Tuioti alone had like 3 or 4 last week. I know that's not the number that it was.
Yeah, but Oregon has the 3rd most PBUs in the country going into this game.
Yeah, their ability, and what's probably really ironic about Oregon's is if you look at the breakdown individually of those pass breakups, probably half of them are from front 7 players batting balls down at the line of scrimmage.
That was kind of what I wanted to touch on was, if Oregon can't get to Morton, who is a different type of, like, you think about the most recent teams Oregon has played, like
mobile QB,
Barnett and Williams are just
USC was a mobile QB as well,
fairly mobile, and he could throw the heck out of the ball. Like, but if you're Morton, like, can you get hands on balls? Can you, even if you can't get to him, can you cause deflections and incompletions outside of the realm of kind of normal passes? I guess that's something to think about. And I guess just the last thing is special teams.
Yeah.
I think
really big against JMU.
It was, and you just kind of wonder, like, Oregon have a kicking game.
Mm-hmm.
This is the best special teams from like a place kicking perspective Oregon has been in probably as long as I've been doing this. And you just think, gosh, where's the line for Dan in terms of pressing his luck?
Yeah,
right. Because in these big games, he wants to be aggressive. But is the confidence level in Sappington, or even like, is it the approach you want to take in a game that you think might be high scoring? Like, hey, within 25 yards, we're just going to kick it, even if it's 4th and 3. Or is this going to be a game where it's
we need touchdowns, not field goals?
Yeah, it's Riverboat Dan, and he's out here rolling the dice, and they go for it like 7 or 8 times, like they did against Penn State.
How much do you believe in like the moment? Oregon's been here before. This is their 3rd straight New Year's Day bowl game. Obviously, they played in the Rose Bowl last year. Obviously, that game didn't go well for them.
No.
Liberty Bowl, I call it the Liberty Bowl all the time. The Fiesta Bowl against Liberty. Yeah. Was another one. They dominated that one. I'll be remiss. I think this is Tech's only January 1st bowl game that they've ever played in, and if it's not, it's been decades since they have played in a January bowl game. We had Jarrett on the show from Texas Tech, our Texas Tech site earlier this week or last week, and he confirmed like our suspicions of this is like the biggest game in Texas Tech history. And so I'm wondering, just like, do we buy into Oregon's been here before? They're used to this level of pressure. They're used to this level of the stakes of what's at play here. They've been in it before. You've done it before. You talk to any coach, and it's always about their players. It's always about repetition. We need guys to get into the flow. We need guys to just rep everything out. And Oregon has more reps in these types of games compared to Texas Tech. And I know the rosters change everywhere, but even the guys that have portaled in from Texas Tech, like David Bailey, by far one of their best defensive players. He came from Stanford, a program that has been mediocre at best.
Yeah. Probably losing record overall during his time.
Jacob Rodriguez was a transfer from Virginia, has been at Texas Tech now for a couple of years. But remember, even Texas Tech the year before was like 8-5. They weren't a team that I thought you looked at and said, oh, yeah, next year, easy, they're going to be a top 5 team in the country. You probably looked at Texas Tech and said, they have the pieces where if things kind of align correctly, the ball bounces their way, they stay healthy, they could be a 10-win team. But I don't know if anyone was really out here saying they were going to be, a top 3 team in the country going into the year that they've spent most of the year at. Is the moment, how do these two teams handle the moment? That to me could be a huge wild card factor for both sides. Is Oregon prepared, or is Oregon too laxed? Is Texas Tech prepared for the moment? Do they have tightness in their play, trying not to make the mistake instead of playing free? I think for me, that's another thing that I'll be watching, is just how loose are these guys? How dialed in, locked in are they going to be?
On the Tech bowl game side, just looked it up. They played in the Cotton Bowl a couple times, 2006, 2009, under Mike Leach, lost to Alabama and Ole Miss in those games. So that's the closest thing based on what I can tell here, scrolling through here. I apologize if we miss any of that.
Right.
I guess I'm less interested in Tech's readiness for a big moment because they played in the Big 12 championship game,
that
right?
helps.
And they played all the top teams in their conference, which, I'm not going to say anyone in the Big 12 is as good as Oregon. I think that would be a mistake. I think if you were to look at pretty much all the metrics out there, I don't think there's a team in the Big 12 other than Texas Tech that's as good as Oregon. But I will say, they've been in big moment games and they've thrived. Like that Big 12 championship game, they were undoubtedly the better team. That second half was about as dominant as you'll see a team play.
Yeah.
They completely kicked the butt out of that Cougar offense in that game, just forced turnover after turnover. I guess it's just I have maybe more confidence that this Oregon team is battle tested, and that maybe gives them an advantage, as opposed to saying it's a Tech deficiency. I just think maybe if you're being generous to Oregon, you can say this is a Oregon advantage that could be something that they lean upon. And again, they also didn't thrive last year in this game, and they're motivated by it. Do they come out and play tight because they don't want to repeat that, or is that just become? And Lanning's been so good over his time, in my opinion, of taking learning moments and actually building off of them. So I do have confidence this group is going to come out and play a really, really strong game. But I'm not necessarily as worried about Tech being
tight, nervous.
I don't know if that's something I'm as worried about.
That's fair. In the Big 12 championship game, certainly Joey McGuire, I think it was, or maybe it was their defensive coordinator last week, talked about how they basically had to operate for the last 3 or 4 weeks, knowing that if they lost a regular season game before the Big 12 championship, that they would be out of the playoffs. And that probably matters as well. Let's go into score predictions here.
Yeah.
You'll go first, I'll go second.
Yeah, and we didn't do the props. Another thing, John unfortunately had some scheduling conflicts. He will be back on our show on Thursday,
Post-game,
reviewing the post game. We wanted to have him on. I know people like having his insights. You'll definitely see those after the game sometime on Thursday. And we'd love to have a score predictions. And we'll have all of our score predictions, the two of us, John and Jackson, up on the site sometime, probably on Wednesday, I think.
Yeah.
Before the game. I've kind of always been confident that Oregon would win this game, just in terms of I do think they're more talented.
Yeah.
I don't know the margin like I've gone back and forth, I guess I should say, on that. And I'm going to land on like 34-27 is kind of where my head is at going into this one. A game where I think both teams are going to come out and fire punch. Like I do think these teams are probably, this is probably the most evenly matched, competitively balanced game in the quarterfinals. I think that's pretty fair.
Mm-hmm.
Just looking at the other teams, you look at the betting line, Oregon, like a slight shift to 2.5 point favorites. I think it feels fair, especially coming from the Oregon side and the Oregon podcast, talking to an Oregon audience to project a level of confidence that Oregon can win this game. Now, would I be surprised if Tech won? No. Would I be surprised if Oregon blew Tech out? Probably not. I think I would be surprised if Tech blew out Oregon.
Yes.
Just because it would feel like, okay, now we've got a real problem. Back-to-back years in the quarterfinals, you get blown off the field by two teams. And maybe Tech goes on and wins the championship, and you can look back and go, oh, they just played the two best teams in the sport back-to-back years. That's a tough break. At the same time, like, I just don't think this Oregon team is exploitable to that point. And if they are, it's going to be at the line of scrimmage, an area where I think they've taken such massive steps forward over the last half decade, especially starting with Mario, moving into Dan, that's going to be like, okay, is this fraudulent? Why are they Joe Moore Award finalists if they get crushed at the line of scrimmage in the games that matter? Why are they defensively sending all these defensive linemen to the NFL draft? Like last year, they had 3 guys go in the first 3 rounds in the NFL draft, but Ohio State kind of did whatever they wanted against them. This year, look at it. I don't know.
They have 3 or 4 more guys that could go to the NFL.
I was just going to say, like, yeah, I mean, like Amari Washington projects as the first-round pick right now in some of the mocks. Bear Alexander, as you said earlier, was a second or third if he would have stayed in. I think Mateo and Tatum, you can put in that same range. Like, they have 4 guys that could be day 1, day 2 picks on this defense on the front. And if they get pushed around, it's going to be like, really? Okay. Like,
you're doing something wrong schematically.
Yeah, something's going on here, and it doesn't feel like it's the Jimmy and Joe's. It's something with the X's and O's. So, yeah, I like Oregon 34-27. I do think this is going to be a competitive game. And I think a game that's really memorable because I think there's the opportunity for both teams just to make some really big plays. Like, there's just a lot of playmakers on the field here when you've got a Jacob Rodriguez on defense, a David Bailey, or Mello Height. Obviously, we know the Oregon kind of names there. I think there's going to be a lot of fun moments and plays in this game, but ultimately, I like Oregon to win by 7.
It's funny. We have very similar scores.
We
always and we never really talk about what we're predicting beforehand, which is really funny. Tech has only had 2 games this season where they've scored under 30 points. They lost at ASU 26-22. Their quarterback did not play in that game. That was the
important distinction.
That was the first one in which he was out with an injury. And then the next lowest game was a 29-7 win against BYU November 8th at home. Every other game, they've scored in the mid-30s all the way up to 67 points week 1 against Arkansas Pine Bluff. So I'm going to predict a score that, to a degree, like I feel confident in Oregon, but also there's not a lot of confidence. I don't know if Oregon can hold them this low just because historically this season it's been very difficult to do that, to keep them under 30 points. But I do think Oregon will. I have Oregon actually winning this game 37-27. And I have a 10-point win. I think the way this game's going to play, I agree with you. I honestly wouldn't be surprised. Tech gets the ball first, and they march right down the football field, and they score a touchdown and go up 7-0 early in this game. It wouldn't surprise me if Oregon is trailing or tied at halftime. Mm-hmm. But I do think in the second half there's going to be a couple sequences maybe where the moment just shows up for Oregon. They make the play that's needed. They get the turnover that's needed. They get the sack or whatever, or the explosive play. The offensive line gives Dante Moore the time to hit Malik Benson over the top, and that's what really dictates the game. But ultimately, I think what's going to happen is a late touchdown is going to happen, and then holy smokes.
Atticus
Sappington, Automaticus, steps up late, and to your point, knocks in kind of that mid-range, go for it, or kick a field goal type kick to put them up 10 in the fourth quarter. And that kind of ends up being the separator of, oh man, the lead now just stretched to another score. They're not going to have enough time to make this one. So I'm going 37-27. I think Oregon wins this game. They advance to the Peach Bowl to play the winner of Alabama or Indiana in a week's time, 8 days in Atlanta. They'll have to make another cross-country trip. But we're both predicting a win. We'll see if it plays out that way. Regardless, Erik and I will be at the Hard Rock Stadium, breaking down pregame, in-game, and post-game. We'll be back. Next time you hear from us will be from a podcast from that stadium, somewhere in that stadium, talking about what we saw play out between the Oregon Ducks and the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Until the next time, you've been listening to the Autzen Audibles podcast.
Talk to you later, folks.